You're tuning into the Journey to Your Best Self podcast, where we explore the path to holistic well-being, personal growth, and living a fulfilling life. Each episode, we bring you insightful conversations, practical tools, and inspiring stories to help you integrate your mind, body, and spirit on your journey to becoming your best self. Let's dive in and embark on this journey together.
3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. I'm Brian O'Neill, and I'm joined by my co-host and Your One Self resident expert, clinical hypnotherapist, certified life coach, and yoga instructor, Tara O'Neill. Fortunately for her, my sister as well. Together, we explore the transformative conversations on mental health, wellness, and personal growth. Today, we are truly honored to have a distinguished guest with us, Mr. Moffat Kago. Mr. Moffat is the CEO of the Kenyan Counseling and Psychological Association, the KCPA, and the visionary behind the Mshauri Therapy Hub, an organization dedicated to providing holistic counseling services to individuals and families in need. Through his leadership and unwavering commitment to mental health advocacy, Mr. Moffat has made a significant impact in promoting emotional well-being and resilience across Kenya. We have the privilege of delving into his insights on mental health, the importance of accessible counseling services, and the impactful work being done at Mshauri Therapy Hub. If you're interested in learning more about his work, we will have links in the show notes and an opportunity on our website where you can donate to his truly inspirational cause. So now join us as we embark on a conversation that promises to be enlightening and empowering. Mr. Moffat, welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brian and Tara, for having me all the way from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm glad to be here.
It's an absolute honor. We are looking forward to this in so many ways. The work that you do is truly service to humanity, and we can't wait for you to shed some light on the impact that you've done so far, and also how we can continue, because we do have a little ways to go to reach even more people in need. So thank you for being here.
Yeah,
Most
absolutely.
appreciated.
And I totally agree. You know, one of the things that attracted us to bring you on board was initially you might think that some of the challenges people face are unique to their environment. And while their environment does play a factor, and there are certainly cultural and socioeconomic differences in the mental health challenges people face and where the traumas begin and where they come from, there were so many commonalities that your organization seeks, to find answers to, and the things that we are trying to do as well, that it made it a lot of the questions that we're trying to answer here on Journey to Your Best Self are questions of humanity writ large are trying to answer, right? These things they're global, they're evergreen. People have been asking them for many years. So often, no matter where you are, a lot of times that shared humanity is evident when you're trying to help people. So I know that we had talked leading up to this interview, but you and I both kind of noticed that a lot of the challenges you see people facing back home in Kenya are a lot similar to the challenges that we see here in the United States, and in the West. With that in mind, can you talk a little bit more and start us off? What led you to wanting to establish Mshauri Therapy Hub? Give a little bit of background there.
Thank you so much, Brian, once again. Like you have said, my name is Moffat Kago. Locally, I am popularly known as Moffat Mshauri, and that is how I was able to come up with the name of this organization, Mshauri Therapy Hub. Mshauri means a counselor. It's a local language, Kiswahili, that stands for counselor, or one that gives advice. Now, back to your question, Brian. Number of years ago, I got myself, or I found myself in a situation where I had my own mother very sick and in intensive care unit for a long time. And I'm talking about some 17, 18 years ago. And while I was there in the hospital, I saw people, in a nice ICU situation, people coming and looking so helpless, and no one was able to attend to them. I wanted to really attend to them, but I felt helpless because I didn't know what do I need to tell these people who are looking so devastated, to the point that I felt like I personally didn't have my mother in the hospital bed. And I would say that answering the question of what led me into pursuing therapy or psychology, counseling psychology, is to try and see how I can contribute to answering some human questions that sometimes go unanswered. And then I also realized that in the Kenyan context, the African context, I came to realize that this was also an area, and it still remains an area that is not really embraced. And to a large extent, you also realize that it is also an area, or it's a geographical space where we have got very few men who have trained as therapists. And I would say that this is what informed my decision to go back to school and pursue some skills so that I can be able to help people, and so that I can be able to provide a solution, or to enable people discover their deep-seated resources. Because the reason why somebody comes to counseling is not because they want me to advise them or to guide them, but to help them see the internal resources that they carry, and they are able to exploit those resources to answer their own problems and questions of life that they may be having. And therefore, this is a desire that came to me with a lot of weight. I went to school and I started practicing, and I also started teaching the same. So, and because I believe in impacting people, and this is what even Mshauri Therapy Hub is all about, impacting people so that they can as well go and impact others. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and we do two of our major pillars are service to others, which you are so clearly doing, and you got that calling, and that's so beautiful and inspiring. But you made a really clear distinction of, it's not about giving advice, it's about empowering them to find their own inner resources. Can you expand on how do you even go about doing that in your practice?
Thank you. One thing, Tara, you will realize is that every time clients are coming for therapy, they come feeling defeated, and they come feeling like they are signing their death sentence to a large extent. And because of the challenges they may be going through, there are times when they catastrophize their situations to the point that they are not able to see anything remaining around them. And one of the things that has impressed me is when I help my clients to reflect on some things that they did so successfully in the past, and we are able to look at what it is that they have been able to do positively. Because many times people come feeling defeated, they come feeling condemned, and they are actually not able to focus on what they have been able to do successfully. So one of the things to resuscitate this, or to resurrect these deep-seated resources, is to focus my clients on their positive stories in the past. And once they are able to focus on their positive stories, then at that particular point, it becomes like a very small spark that is dying off. And they give me an opportunity to fan it up until when it becomes a huge fire. Thank you.
That's a beautiful analogy. I mean, that I think people can I visually was able to see this, so you're bringing the spark back out and you're expanding on it. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
Mm.
it is so wow, really profound insights, even from a healer. Was that just innate that you knew that you needed to not tell them what to do or tell them what they needed to do, but help them find it from within? Or was that something you learned after so many years? How did you come to that realization?
Thank you so much, Brian, for that question. Number one, I would say that I would not be telling the truth if I say that I just got to know about it from the blues. I have interacted with books, and at the same time, I have been able to contextualize issues. Because in as much as, like what you said when we started, in as much as what people go through is, or challenges that people are facing in this century are very universal, it goes without saying that in as much as they are universal, we see them from different cultural lenses. And therefore, as I interacted with my studies, as well as looking at how people come to me looking like, I got interested in trying to, to light up this small spark. And once I first of all let my clients know that actually what has happened to you is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation, meaning that even me, as trained as I am, if I happen to be faced by such a challenge, chances are I would react the same. And I got to realize that when people hear or get to understand or to perceive that you have understood them, that is the beginning of healing. And therefore, that is the point when they can allow you to tour their hearts and you can point them to these resources that they carry, but they don't seem to know that they carry. And therefore, I would say, back to your question, that this knowledge has been expounded by the fact that I have sat in class, I have been taught, and I have tried to practice it, and I have realized that it works.
And
Excellent. That was an incredible way to.
You have the Yoast model of the mind, body, spirit, right? So where it wasn't just a book, right? You have your faith as well. You practice what you preach, so you have the well-roundedness, and you're able to see the interconnectedness that we all share. And I love that you are able to normalize some of these things. I have uh, a so-called therapist of my own, and she would say, if I was down on myself, well, I can't believe I would have done something like that, and she reframes it to, you adapted beautifully, right? So it's like to give people that actually, that shutting down or that crying or whatever it might be that they think is abnormal is a beautiful adaptation to something that was adverse. So I think
Absolutely.
that's so we're so hard on ourselves. We should be perfect, we should be this, we should be that, but we can't see it. And I think the beauty of the work that you're doing is those people that can't see the forest from the trees, you're almost reminding them, like, hey, this is what it's like to be human. And so to take that forward into, what about the really, really tough stuff, the almost unfathomable, unbearable that you come across? Is that a different approach? How can we start that conversation?
Come again, I missed that, Tara.
Sure. So
Yeah, I mean,
when we come,
those
go ahead.
deeper traumas, or those those
Right.
major
The
challenges,
the
there's a scale of, and not to minimize anyone's what
right,
they're
right.
looking to you for, but there is a scale of, you know, uh, whether it's, impoverishment or, loss of, family members, or,
Yeah.
there's a difference between someone's situation in, say, Westlands,
Right.
versus Kibera, right? So
Yeah.
somebody could be
I've
really struggling and,
yes.
with something that, I don't know if that's, Tara, this is where you were going, but
Yes. So because I've been very fortunate, very privileged to have my basic needs met, to not live in a war-torn area, not to minimize those struggles and that adversity and that and those adaptations that maybe weren't ideal. Is it different when you are working with somebody that has had almost unfathomable adversity in worn-torn areas or major loss throughout their life? How do you go about dealing with that and approaching that type of a client?
Thank you again for that question. And I want to say that there are some factors that we've got to consider, even without trivializing a client's pain, because people feel pain in a very diverse way. But I think one of the things that has helped me is to also understand, and this is the principle that I work with, that the client or the person who is coming for therapy is the expert as far as their story is concerned. I am one person who does very well with a model that we call narrative therapy, storytelling. And I am guided by this principle that the client is the expert. And there is an element of me as a therapist to adopt what we call cultural humility, so that the client can first of all educate me what it means to them to have gone through whatever they went through. So whether they are coming from a war-torn area, or this is a person who is coming from a different context, I have a responsibility of, first of all, listening to their story and having me educate me about how their world looks like, so that we can begin the interventions from that point. I think that is how I would answer that, Tara.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. It's beautiful. So you can adapt the same model, right?
Yeah,
Universally.
yeah.
When you, yeah. No, I beautiful answer. Thank
yeah.
you.
And on that note, so since 63, right, Kenya has been, a model stability, and there hasn't been a lot of the extreme violence necessarily. We have had some issues, right, in 2007, and some things with elections in recent past, but the actual, official, conflicts, haven't gotten necessarily to, Kenya. Many of your colleagues this spring had, visited Rwanda, right, for, the anniversary that they had, um, annually from since the 1994, genocide and conflict that occurred there, the Civil War. That obviously is another level of distance from maybe what some people may have experienced, here in the West. So, um, is there a different approach that you've maybe talking to different colleagues and people that have worked with victims or perpetrators, or just those that were involved with something that, in history is so unique? Does that take, some totally different approaches and strategies to deal with, or is it the same general, I don't want to speak for you, but empathy and understanding and connection and finding it within them? Or do those cases, take different means to try to help those individuals?
Thank you, Brian. And I think my answer to that question is closely related to what I have just said. Because when humans go through a traumatic experience, to a large extent, the reaction to that experience is more or less the same. But then for a person who is coming to assist, they have a huge responsibility to, first of all, understand the environment of this particular person. Probably, I would say the only difference would be like the example you have just given. We were in Rwanda, and it is worth noting that even when I organized for this trip, we were going there to be educated by the local professionals. In as much as we had our professionals here, they would lose authority to talk about trauma in Rwanda, yet they do not have a taste of what it was like. In as much as we are professionals, we do not have authority, to talk about it without having people who went through it. And I want to say that the only approach that I find so workable for me is the approach of taking what I have just called cultural humility. And this is where you take a not knowing stance, so that, first of all, before you respond, you have an understanding of what these people went through. And when we talk about empathy, unconditional positive regard, non-judgmental attitude, those are principles that apply across board. But in as much as they apply across board, we have a responsibility of, first of all, understanding the client's story, so that these skills that we are bringing on board and the principles we are bringing on board can find a place inside this person, because you have, first of all, been able to understand them. Let me give you an example, Brian. Just
Sure.
yesterday, I had a very, sad case that I was dealing with, of this family that, children who have been raised in a very volatile family. And it is a family that I have been working with, for some time. And last year, I remember they lost one of their children, a son, to suicide. And then yesterday, a girl came. And I took this not knowing stance because, when we talk about culture, we define it as people's way of life. And it is important for people to know that even within a family has its own culture. Now, within that family, each and every individual in that family, they have their own culture. And therefore, I had never heard the story that I heard yesterday about this family. I had to sit down, being the first session, to just listen what has been happening, so that when I come in with my counseling skills and theories and all that I have learned in class, or that I have gathered after listening to people, you don't just use them for the sake of using them. You use them after you have been able to understand this person, so that as you respond, and it is amazing that I remember after the session was done, this girl told me, I feel so relieved. I feel like I can now begin to live again. And I asked her why. The first session was just about to listen to her. And she told me, because I feel understood. For the first time in my life, I feel understood. So, back to your question, the greatest responsibility for any helper is, first of all, understanding the story of the other person.
So well
That's
said.
so
Excellent.
so profound and helpful. And the takeaway that I'm getting, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's as a skilled healer, that the skilled healer that you are, you're really going in with a clean slate. Whether someone is coming to you because of the death of a loved one or being bullied or a breakup, you're not saying, oh, well, this is worse than this and this is worse than this. Like, you're not comparing their individual experience. You're not there's no judgment. There is none of your preconceived conditioning that you're putting upon them, and they can feel that energetically, probably in many ways. And so ultimately, the feeling of being seen, heard, and understood, because many times people will trivialize, it's like, well, it didn't actually happen to me. But they don't understand that it doesn't mean it's not traumatic or holding them back. So is that part of it? Is that part of it, that we can't compare one trauma to another, and that, it's just seeing, hearing, and understanding, each individual?
Absolutely, absolutely. We cannot compare situations and cases that people bring our way, because they may sound similar, they may sound the same, but this person's reaction to the same, the way they look at it, and the kind of pain it has caused them, it is so different. And therefore, it is a call to all of us to listen. And I keep saying that listening, for me as a practitioner, is what I would say is a game changer. Because the moment let's say, for example, people have lost, and in our context, we have had this many times, that when people are grieving, for example, somebody may be grieving because they have lost a child. Somebody may be grieving. Nowadays, I see a lot of our population, maybe because of technology and the fact that people are able to move, from Kenya to other countries, and there's a slow change of our way of life, in that previously people never used to really care about, to seem interested in things like pets, but we know this is more of a Western culture, where you guys, you have your dogs, you have, and today it is all over in Nairobi, and somebody loses a pet and they come for therapy so devastated. But for somebody a helper who is so traditional, might want to trivialize this, and they are asking, "What's a pet? Are you crazy? If just that's a dog, that's a cat. Why? You have now
Sure.
trivialized that person's pain."
Right.
And because we have not had a moment to have them educate us, there is always a high temptation of trivializing their pain. And therefore, like you are saying, reactions are different, people are different, personalities are different, and therefore we can only, first of all, seek to be understood.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
Beautiful.
amazing. Actually, we've had this conversation, not to trivialize it, of course, but if you have, you go like up country, right? Oshago, you see these wild dogs, or they're just like loose, or they don't even almost have owners, right? And it's just
Yeah.
like they're
Well, great, Brian.
milling around, and
Give a little more
yeah.
context for our
So
listeners that you're talking about in Kenya.
right. So if you go, to Kenya, like Mr. Moffat was saying, there can just be kind of feral dogs that they're, innocuous. They're not dangerous or seeming to me, but they're kind of just without a owner or place that they go, and they're almost more of the background. But now, like you said, with the influence of the rise of the middle class, upper middle class, Western, culture, they're more of having the pets is a thing. So that speaks to something that I wanted to get into, right? So maybe a more traditional therapist or person would trivialize that. So do you see um people that are now younger, Gen Zers and millennials, being more open-minded to coming to a place like Mshauri Therapy Hub, and that's great if so. Um, and in that same vein, do you see people still that are hesitant with you and maybe a little bit reserved in opening up to let you know the full story? Does that make your job more challenging? How do you connect with them in that case if they're maybe a little bit uncomfortable with the therapeutic process?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I usually say that therapy is offering counseling is not for the faint-hearted. And finding your way to a human's heart is usually not easy. But going back to your question, I have been receiving people from different ages, socio-economic status, and people do have their own problems at their level and at their age. But then I also do experience people whom we refer to as mandated clients. These are people probably who have been sent by their parents. Others probably have been sent by their employers, not because they had thought of therapy as a primary thing for them, but maybe because somebody else saw the need of them going for therapy. And I can say that a person who has been mandated for counseling, sometimes they do prove difficult to open up, because sometimes they wonder whether this is the right space for me to say what I need to say. And it is usually a challenge, and especially if somebody is not skilled in framing questions and building a rapport with such a person to the point where they are able to open up. Let me give an example, because we are receiving even, let me say personally, I am receiving cases that come, people who are from, gay community. Allow me to say that, and I do receive them. But sometimes maybe these are young people, and then their parents have observed a behavior that is out of the norm of their family, and they refer them to a counselor. And in Africa, this is something that is, there is a lot of stigma around it, and people have been ostracized. And when somebody like that comes, they would definitely fear to open up because they do not know how I'm going to respond to that. And whether I'm going to judge them the way they have been judged by the community, by the families. And it is usually an uphill task. But if I can give an example, I remember one girl some years back who came and had been referred, and she was fearing to open up. And I remember, telling her, what brings you for therapy? And she says, my mother told me to come. Why did she tell you to come? And she was like, I don't know, and being a young girl, I don't know. And that's a response that is so blocking and so dismissive. And I remember going a little further and asking her, what do you think your mother might have observed to have told you to come? And I am asking you this question even as I empathize with you, because I know it can be so hard and so difficult when somebody just tells you to go for therapy. Even if I was in your place, I think I would also find it hard to open up. But what is it that you think maybe she observed that made you want to come for therapy? And it is at that point she said, maybe my friends. And then I'm like, what about your friends? You are 19 years, and I believe you are having your own friends, and I know some of the characteristics of of emerging as a teenager is breaking away from family norms. So it's not unusual. So what is it that she has observed about your friends? Then we talked, and long story short, I got a way of getting into her heart, and we were able to discuss the issues. She was able to own up the process. She was able to own up therapy. And at this point, we were successful in putting aside her mother. Your mother is not in therapy. First of all, she mandated you to come, and I can imagine how that made you feel. And we were able to have a breakthrough. Yeah, so I see them coming. Sometimes it's a challenge, but with God's help, I have mastered the way of getting into a person's heart. As a matter of fact, Tara, I even forgot to tell Brian, I am an author. I have written my first book called Breaking Transgenerational Family Chains. And I am doing my second one, is just about to be launched, Trusting God for Resources, called Touring the Heart of Your Teenager. Just to tour the heart. How do you tour that?
Two topics that are close.
Yeah.
The former very close to Tara's heart. The transgenerational trauma is like,
Yes.
and then Tara, if I can just jump in real quick. There's so many places to go, but a couple of things that I wanted to mention. You talked a couple of times about dealing with families, working with a family, and then the referral was the parent of this last example that you referenced. Can you talk a little bit about the difference, the benefits of group counseling, as in family counseling and couples counseling, versus working with an individual? And where are the benefits for the person receiving your assistance when you're working with them one-on-one, and then when you're working maybe with them and their partner, or with them and their other family members?
Wow, thank you for that question. I must begin by saying that I'm very passionate about families. Very passionate because myself, I grew up in a family where, in Africa, parents can really be rough, and especially during our times. Being raised by, a father who was a disciplinarian, and a father who was not very close to me, and growing up with that distance. We don't hate each other per se, but again, there is no chemistry, if I may say that. So I grew up as a man who was so timid, a very timid child. Wasn't even able to perform very well in my school because of, again, fear. And I think out of that, I have developed a desire over the years to try and help families, and especially where there are children. I am so passionate about talking, bringing the whole thing about children on the table and how we parent them. Now, back to your question, Brian, I would want to say that research tells us that family is a system, and it is not possible to study a family in isolation, or rather studying about a family by having just one person from that family, and they make you draw conclusions about that family. So we say it's a system, meaning that you've got to incorporate all those members of that family to be able to understand the dynamics of that particular family, because all of us carry something about that family. One of the things, if I may give an example with my own family, both parents, my parents were both teachers, My mother is now late, but my father is still alive. And we grew up in a family where we were not allowed to talk about our issues. Don't talk about, my father would kill you, I would say, for lack of a better word, to let people know, about your family. And therefore, you realize that this is a family that grows up with a lot of secrecy, with a lot of, you go through issues, you don't want to share them with anyone because of the early life disposition that you are given as a child by your family culture. And therefore, I have realized that we have suffered a great deal because of just dying alone. And for you to be able to understand such a problem, you cannot understand it from Moffat or talking about Moffat in isolation. You've got to talk about that entire family so that if there is something that needs to be deconstructed, a trail of thought that needs to be challenged, that needs to be confronted, you have been able to understand the entire family. Therefore, I am so passionate about the institution of the family because it is the primary foundation of any society. Now, when it comes to a couple, again, we usually say, and this is what I this is my principle, that in as much as we are together in marriage, we are one yet separate. We are one yet separate. And I usually like hearing the oneness of a person in that union before, or rather, I like hearing the separateness of a person before hearing the oneness. I hope I'm clear up to that point.
Yes,
hearing the
absolutely.
separateness of a person before I hear the oneness. And I usually have a problem with, couples who come and someone just wants to eclipse the other one. And they want to really overshadow them to the point that this person ceases to exist. And it is like there is a subconscious motivation to wanting the other party to cease to exist so that this other person can exist. And it is at that point that a marriage becomes toxic. And it is at that point that depression begins to have its way. So listening to a person's separateness before I hear about their oneness is very key. And it reaches a point when I have to hear them as an individual, okay? So that I can be able to listen to this separateness of this person. And so that I can now have the basis of educating them to understand the importance of separateness, because it is the separateness that brings the oneness. Once separateness have been embraced, that I love you for who you are, I want to live with you, I acknowledge, I accept. In fact, I usually say that the beauty of any marriage lies in the embracing of separateness. So therefore, the approaches are so different when you are talking to an individual, when you are talking to a family, and when you are talking to a couple.
Wow, well said. Very,
Thank
very
you.
complex question for
Yes.
me, and then very well said. Tara, go ahead.
Yes, no, there's so many beautiful things that you've said that I could, we could talk all day. But for brevity's sake, I do want to go back to something that is near and dear to my heart, and that is the transgenerational trauma and cycles. Because I think we now know, it is very challenging to get very far in therapy if we don't include some sort of our family of origin or upbringing in our immediate life. And I think a big part of what you're saying is is breaking the cycle, because maybe the last generation or the last couple generations that really formed the family unit didn't have therapy available, or it was just not as prevalent as it is now. Globalization, the beauty of the internet, of spreading awareness, and all of this is really helpful for heading in the right direction evolutionarily. Though transgenerational trauma is still, pretty new, in that we know now, I believe genetically, it's 7 generations back that is living within our DNA. And so to speak to that, maybe we should have this conversation after I read the book. But how can we have compassion for our forefathers and our ancestors, and maybe even going into to the spiritual side of things? Do you bring that into, like, for example, in my personal spiritual practice, I call upon my grandmother, my ancestors, to help me move forward and connect with them, honor them for what they did for our family, the sacrifices that they made. How can we bring that conversation into the therapy world, or is that separate from the work that you're doing right now?
Amazing. And you are touching on another very, very, very wide and, an area that is, again, ingrained in my heart, because I will make sure that every time I have someone come in for therapy, I never forget to look at their family of origin. And when you talk about transgenerational trauma, this is so real. And in fact, I wrote an article, I don't know, 3 days ago. I'm gonna send this article to Brian, on how the disposition of life we are given. And this is what my book talks about. Although my book is it's just an easy book for general public consumption. It's not very scientific, although I have tried to borrow scientific concepts and integrating them with the Word of God, because I am also one person who loves reading the Bible and bringing out those concepts into integration of what I do. Now, those transgenerational issues, we carry them forward, we pass them down as a baton to the following generations. And this happens so subconsciously, because it happens out of our dispositions of life, which were given to us by people that we actually don't understand, and they made us normalize an abnormality.
Mm.
And we continue passing down that abnormality to future generations. And this is so important to focus on, because again, many people do not understand. And one of the things that I usually say as I work with clients who have suffered some of these transgenerational issues is, first of all, bringing this psychoeducation to get to know where it started, who was informed, or rather, who was involved in its formation. Like now, for instance, I have encountered a case again that I had some years back, of a boy who came to me, and this boy was looking so timid, nail biting and fidgeting and all manner of things. And we started talking. And I remember asking him about, his upbringing. But of course, he was a little bit not comfortable, because even coming for therapy, he was looking so exhausted. And I had to reach out to the mother. And I told the mother, I remember telling the mother, I want you to tell me something about how this boy was right from the time he was a child. And I want you to talk to me to tell me about his father. And of course, long story short, the father used to be very toxic. And therefore, this boy is also very toxic. Reason being, the father has demeaned him, has called him names, has told him he's going to be a failure. You will amount to nothing. And then when I was told about his father, I told the wife, can I have someone who can give me a story about the father to the father of this boy? And I got a brother to an uncle to this man, and he narrated to me how the father to the father of this boy was again so toxic. You know, in fact, I remember him telling me that this old man had told the father to this boy that he's gonna revoke his name. You know, in Africa, we are named after, like myself, I'm named after my mother's father, you know? And the father to this man had told him, I'm gonna revoke that name because I, again, don't like hearing it. Because my father, who is now the great grandfather, did ABCD to me. So it is so real. Sometimes we pass down these issues, these traumas, generations after generations, because of an erroneous definition of masculinity. You know, in Africa, and I know across the world, masculinity has got diverse definitions. Some of them have got cultural lenses in them, you know. So it is so true, Tara, that the issue of transgenerational transmissions, they are so real, but the community, the public needs to be educated about the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will sometimes say, if I have a parent call about me seeing their teenager, I will often say, you know, I'd like to see you as well. You know, I might give them a complimentary session, but because I want them to see their kid is only going to get so much better if their parent is not changing their ways, you know, especially if they're living under the same roof and they're in still in formative years, because and you can see it, right? I will work with a lot of clients, teenagers that are very anxious, they're very stressed, they're very nervous, and then you know, and then their parent will come in and it's the same. And so I think sometimes the best thing we can do when parents say, well, I don't know what to do with my children, it's like, well, work on yourself as well, right? So I think that parents want to do the best for their children. If we can get the message out that it's not about telling your kid that they're wrong or they're bad, it's about saying, taking some responsibility, because kids are really, really open to that when you admit, hey, I'm doing the best I can. It's when we say, you're wrong, you're doing this, and attacking the child, that they don't have the context or the concept, maybe, or the cognitive ability to understand that. So thank you. That's huge. That's just one message that I think could help, is especially with parents that want to do anything for their kid to succeed. It's like, okay, well, you know what? It's going to be hard. It might be hard or challenging or uncomfortable, but work on yourself. Go to therapy. You know, just give it a try. Just give it a couple of sessions. And then at least you could say, oh, well, maybe that's not for me right now. But just how can we get them in the door, or a group, a support group? Or is that something that, you know, we need as a society, we need to get, you know, especially for men. You mentioned the masculine. You know, I want to see more support groups for men, and to, you know, get rid of these toxic masculinity definitions that might even just be making it harder for, you know, the man that's struggling in the modern world. I mean, we all are having a little bit of an identity crisis, but I think that, could you speak to that, or if Brian wants to add on to that masculine? I know that was kind of two parts. One is, how do we get the parents to therapy? And then two, how do we get those support groups, maybe particularly for
Thank you, Tara, once again. Indeed, it is important for parents to be brought on, to the table to discuss the welfare of their children. Just yesterday, like I have said, a girl came to me, and I've called their parents because I am so convinced that the healing of this girl, emotional, psychological, mental healing, is completely and entirely dependent on the change that the parents are going to have or to make within their union.
Yeah.
Because we have got children who have suffered a lot. Like I said earlier, and especially when they grow up in this union, in this marriage that is so toxic, they get used to seeing their father clobbering their mother, hurling insults at each other, competing against each other, all the time living under fear of abandonment, fearing that their parents are going to divorce. And I can tell you for sure, this is a ticking time bomb, because if we do not educate the parents, like for this particular case, I have already summoned the parents on Monday, because I feel like they are likely to lose this girl, the same way they lost their son, unfortunately, and this is the clear message I'm gonna give them, that if you guys are not gonna change, this is going to be the pattern of your family. Yeah. And the healing of this particular child is dependent on, there's no way you can make a child become a surrogate spouse, because children have been made to become surrogate spouses. That they are the ones who are meeting the needs of their fathers and their mothers. What a father, what a man ought to be doing to his wife, it is the child that is doing it. What a mother ought to be doing to her husband, it is the child who is doing it. It's so unfortunate. It is so painful. It is so sad. Therefore, I keep telling parents that if I encounter such situations, I will tell them to come, and I will let them know that if you guys are not going to do something, you stand to lose this child. And I think I don't mince my words, because that is how it is. So if you value this child, if you love them, then you've got to do something for them. Can you imagine, Tara? I've had a child tell me, a teenager, that I'm so worried about my parents, and I have even contemplated committing suicide. But when I remember them, I feel like I don't want to commit suicide, because they will be sad that I am dead. And I remember telling this child, I am saddened by that statement, because to me, it appears to me that even when you are dead, if that was possible, you are still parenting your parents even in your death. I mean, this child does not have her life, She has surrendered everything about herself to these two grown-ups, And I think this is a conversation we really need to have.
Yes.
So, like you are saying, we've got to go out there and say it as it is.
Yeah. And I think that the children don't even realize it, especially with this newer generation of parents being friends with their teenagers and sharing their personal relationship with the father and even their girlfriends. It's they're crossing the line. And so sometimes my clients will be like, well, that's not normal. And it's, you have to tell them, like, no, it's not normal. And I very much respect the fact that you are upfront and forward with these parents, because they need to be told. Like, someone needs to tell them straight up and not beat around the bush. Sometimes we do we do this dance in the mental health field of like, oh, well, it's not your fault, or not your fault. But I have changed my tone a bit over the years of, yeah, I have empathy, but if sometimes you have to just go directly and say, you will lose this child in one way or another. You're going to lose them. And so they do need to hear that, sometimes a couple times. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah, and that just is credit to you for telling those hard truths, because
Yes.
the truth is a concept that doesn't necessarily bring with it a good or positive connotation, right? So sometimes you, as the objective party, as you said, need to be the one that explains the truth, and that, when you develop that trust, you have to tell the truth, as you see it, and it might not necessarily be something that's positive or they necessarily at that time want to hear, but it's critical to them moving forward. Getting to the masculinity again, and if there's a time restriction, please do let us know. But thinking about the cultural differences, but the connections as well. It's you worded it so well, how there are some things that are universal, but then you do also have to understand and really be open to the cultural context as well to be effective in working with people that are on different cultures. So here we have relatively low unemployment, and we have for a while, but we have people dealing with underemployment, and especially men. It's trending downward where they're making less money than they used to, and the difference between the salaries of men and women are closing. So there's a challenge that they face because there is an expectation that they've had generationally and over the decades. But then in back home in Kenya, there's a similar challenge, but you have, unemployment that is significantly larger. So you still do have the paternalistic expectation that there's definitely remnants of that and it's often quite strong in our society here in the States, but it's certainly even stronger in Kenya, where the man is expected to be a provider, right, historically. So can you talk to some of the challenges that you're seeing with men that aren't able to necessarily provide? And then I heard in a previous interview, you were really having an excellent conversation of both sides, right? Not only the men, but also the women in society, thinking of men primary, secondarily, and tertiarily as providers. And as you put it, wallets, right? So now we're having their potential partners or their current partners or the rest of society thinking, oh, well, that's what their primary, secondary, and tertiary job is supposed to be, right? Getting this paycheck that's as big as possible. So they're thinking that they're getting that external signal, and then that's what they also internalize too. So when they aren't maybe providing the way they think they should, or they're allowed to because of economic challenges, you know, what are you seeing? How are you dealing with it? How do you see it manifesting? What are some of the solutions there?
Mm. Yeah, indeed, that's a universal challenge, where our societies have um, reduced the value of a man to their ability to provide, to material provisions, I would say. And therefore, you realize that men are always on the move, running up and down, looking for money to, even to the point of believing that nothing else is able to move, or they are not even able to express or demonstrate love to their girlfriends and their wives if they don't have money. But one thing that, again, is a paradox, because these same people who are busy looking for money, they are not found in their homes. They are all over the place. And it is amazing that sometimes you will hear again some cases coming for therapy where somebody is now saying, this man is not found at home. In as much as it is looking for money, I think this is not what I signed up to. So it's such a paradox. But then you realize that our society, because again of the normal challenges that we are having, the economic challenges that we are having as a nation, again, they are putting men on the edge. And men have been made to think that the only thing that validates and legitimizes their masculinity is their material provision. And in as much as material provision is necessary, and it is important for us men to provide, I like saying that there is also another element that is really going down and causing the social fabric to erode: the absence of a man. I want to say that I went to, when I was doing my master's, I went to carry out a study at in one of our biggest prison facility in Kenya. And I was looking at the juvenile prisoners. And these juvenile prisoners, I wanted to look at the relationship between a lack of a father and child delinquency, the correlation between the father absence and child delinquency. And it is so amazing that the findings were so saddening and so amazing that about 78% of the children I interacted with, both boys and girls, they come from fatherless homes. Can you imagine?
Wow.
Around 78%. You know, and fatherless, I mean, you know, a child may be having a father at home, they are physically present, that they can see them in the morning, they are there. Their mothers are married, so their fathers are there. But they are so absent emotionally. And another thing that amazed me is that children are able to understand the absence of a man or a father in their lives as a result of death more than they can understand the absence for any other reason. Meaning that a child is able to come to terms with the fact that I don't have a father around me because he died, more than they can understand any other explanation. And I want to say this, that this reducing of men to provision is really tearing apart our society, because there are a lot of things that are really missing. Just the other day, I was trying to help, some children of my relative. And, and sometimes I'm asking myself, these parents are both alive. They are working. Why am I doing this? But the man is so busy, as if myself, I do not work. So busy, cannot even check whether the children, have gone to school. He will drop them, in my place. And I remember I was asking my wife, did he call you to check whether the children went to school? And of course, the answer is no. Why? Because I am busy looking for school fees. But then on the other hand, the children, because of lack of the face of a man, are becoming unruly at home. They are becoming ungovernable at home. There is nothing the mother will tell them and they obey. They are sold out to PlayStations. They are sold out to, doing vape and doing all manner of things. So I'm gonna ask fathers, is this what we want to exchange even as we look for whatever that we are looking for? Is it going to be a substitute for our children, that we're going to lose them as we look for that money? I mean, I think there's a narrative that ought to change. But I also need to turn to the side of ladies and how they have contributed to this. Okay? Because again, I have encountered in therapy a situation where even the women, the mothers, the wives are contributing to this, because a lot of nagging and a lot of, again, and I want to talk about a segment of women that I have observed in my context. I don't know whether this is what is happening in the States, that somebody will say that nowadays women are really coming up well in our context. They are being given opportunities by the government, by employers, and this whole campaign about girl child, which again has worked against the boy child in our context. I am not sure what is happening over there. But again, you realize we are having another section of or segment of women who will say that I have a good job, I have education, I have money, and therefore the only thing that I don't have is a child. And I don't want a man to boss me around. So I can just go outside there and get a seed and get a child. Again, this is another time bomb that we are having to deal with today. I have sat down with children from such context, and they are so mad. And the narrative is like, I want to know my father. And sometimes these kind of women, they want to dodge some of these questions. They don't want to answer them. And I keep saying, and whoever that is listening to this gonna hear this, that a human seed is the only seed that is sown in secret. But once it comes, it demands to know its origin. There is that instinct. There's that feeling. There's that feeling that I want to connect to my origin, because my origin shapes my identity. Our origin shapes our identity. And therefore, this is a very natural instinct, is a very natural motivation that this child wants to know. And I have handled several cases of that nature. So I think we are losing it. In as much as it is important for us to have money and to provide for our children, that can never be replaced by what can come in that arrangement when our presence is there and can be felt.
Wow. Yeah, such a really complicated set of issues that you've been going over, and we really appreciate how thoughtful you are, and just the work that you're doing with such a broad array of challenges. What are some of the things that these men or just others should be doing to fill the void, though, right? Or to make yourself more rounded, or when they're not with you, right? What are some practices that you encourage um, that they do, even the ones that are working, even people that are working, right? If like you said, school fees, they're working so many hours, right? That they're not, is it, spending more time? How can they fill kind of that spiritual or mental side, rather than just focusing on the work? Where can they kind of color the rest of their lives?
Yeah, and
Thank
to
you.
add to that, I think similarly what I was saying, where they can get support, because like you were saying, the absence of the death or the illness of a father, the child can accept more than neglect or abuse or being out of the house working 12, 14 hours a day and just not even looking at the child, right? So maybe they bring home the money, but how can they develop an emotional connection with themselves, increase their emotional intelligence and the emotional connection, and show up for the child?
Thank you, Tara. This is a very interesting aspect. I'm looking forward to a time when you guys will do a seminar, come over, and we talk some of these things. Because the whole question of fathering, it is not about, I usually tell fathers or men, it's not about quantity. It is about quality. It's not about quantity. It's about quality. That even if you are so busy to the point that you are only found at home for 2 hours or maybe a week, 2 hours, 3 hours, that's when your children can see you. The question is, what do you do with those 2 hours? Quality. And I have seen children who are craving and they are yearning and they are crying for some quality time with their fathers. Now, allow me to say this is a very long, can be a very broad topic. But right from the time the children are in the wombs of their mothers, there is usually a natural connection between a child and a mother. Research has it that even when a woman is expecting, there is some communication that happens between a child and a mother, even when they are in their womb. And when a child, say, for example, the mother feels like the child is not playing, they will even run to the hospital to have the baby checked, because they are wondering, there is some communication that is not happening. And there's some research that is trying to suggest that that a child is able to pick, say, for example, when the mother is depressed, that a child is able to pick that. They are able to pick, that right from the time when they are in the womb. Now, you can imagine a child who has been communicating with the mother for 9 months, okay, up to the time when they are born. And then when they are born, research has it that the first sense, the first sense to be developed in a human being is a sense of smell. Okay? Now, this baby gets to know the smell of the mother through the milk as she breastfeeds. And that is why when the mother comes in, the baby will turn the head and they will start following the mother because they can smell milk, coming in, and you can talk about 9 months of being in the womb, and then you talk about some how many, I don't know, Tara can guide me, how many more months before a baby begins to know how to pronounce baba, mama, and quite a chunk of time when this baby is interacting with the mother. So I keep asking in my workshops and conferences, how do we smell to our children as fathers? And you realize that as fathers, even the whole question of, the perfume that we wear, the cologne that we wear, sometimes we keep on changing. We are not consistent as women. If this is the cologne that a woman is wearing, chances are she is having it consistently. But for us men, we don't even smell the same way all the time. So they are not even able to pick. And I think this is it's a divine arrangement. It's a mystery. So I'm trying to paint a picture of the amount of time it takes for a father to begin to interact with the child. Therefore, it goes without saying that for a man to be able to interact with a child, it takes work. It is deliberate. It is conscious that we've got to be there. Start doing those games, little games with them. That moment that you can be found. Yes, I agree you are very busy. I agree your job is so demanding. But those 30 minutes that you have with that child, Are you involved in those games? Those hide and seek games? Can you, all that? Because that is the end, especially when the child is a boy. Because again, research talks about the Oedipus complex, whereby the first sexual figure to a male child is the mother, and that the first sexual figure to a female child is the father. So you can imagine that there is a natural desire for a boy to connect with the mother more than the father, right from the time they are born. Now, for us to be able to get into this equation as men, it takes work. We've got to work. There has to be that deliberate fellowship with these children, playing together, talking to them, whatever that you need to give to them, taking them out, walking with them, riding bicycles with them, and all manner of things. So I encourage people, and especially men, even those who are in diaspora, because sometimes I have received some of these cases. I am far. I cannot be able to be home. And I like challenging them. Do you even do video calls?
Yeah.
Now, when you come home, for your holiday, vacation, what do you do? But unfortunately, and especially those, I'm talking about the Kenyan context, those who work in the States or other countries, unfortunately, when they come home, they only have 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and there is a lot to be done those 3 weeks. They need to visit relatives, they need to do ABCD. But I like asking this question. Within those 2-3 weeks that you come, first of all, when you are abroad, do you do video calls? When you come, do you make sure that even as you go about those other things that you want to do, that you have spared 2 hours every day, 30 minutes every day to do those games, to play with your children, to talk about them, to do some tours with them? So there is no excuse as far as I'm concerned.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Wow,
absolutely, absolutely.
Really,
Yeah.
as always, very, very well said.
Yeah, absolutely. And we
Tara,
will
go
definitely
ahead.
we will have follow-up conversations and workshops,
sure.
and we will have to start to wind down. Can you I like to ask this to everyone. Can you recommend a book, maybe one of your favorites, maybe a transitional one that you'd like to share? It can be a personal one, it can be about psychology, any sort of a nonfiction book that was influential to you or that could be influential to our viewers.
There's a
Aside
book
from
that I
yours, because
love.
we will promote yours. We will make sure everyone reads yours as well, but aside from yours.
Oh, Asante, thank you. I wish I carried a copy. It is in the car, but
We'll put
never
it in
mind.
the
But
show notes. Okay.
okay, no problem. Coming back to the question of men and money and looking for finances, there's a book that I really love. It's written by a Nigerian called Sunday Adelaja. It integrates biblical principles, to the whole subject of finances, and it's called "Money Won't Make You Rich." Money won't
Great
make you
title.
rich.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. I think I have a copy of the same, because it tries to deconstruct this whole aspect of how people are sold out to money to the point that nothing else works around them. We are busy looking for it, and it controls our lives. We don't even know how to manage it. And he talks about some very nice, principles of ruling over money. So I think I can recommend that because it has also been a game changer for me,
Beautiful.
for now. Thank you so much, Tara.
Yes, it's been a pleasure.
Excellent. One of the things that I wanted to touch on, and I should have gotten to it earlier, was the role your faith plays in your practice and your life. whether it's strengthening you and giving you the resolve to deal with so many of the challenges that you're facing, or maybe it acts as a conduit, or probably maybe does all of these things when you have to deal with so much trauma and kind of create that membrane around yourself, right? So you don't kind of take in all of the challenges that you're kind of trying to help people with. So can you please talk about your faith and the role that's played in your journey?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Now, again, research is suggesting that faith is very central in therapy. Not just my faith, but largely the faith of the client. Now, you've asked a very interesting question and very profound, the role that my faith plays. And I want to answer that question by giving an example of some clients that I had, a couple who came, and they were going through some very, very difficult issues, a lot of emotional injuries that they have sustained, a lot of mistrust. And I remember the woman came feeling so hurt and so wounded, to the point that, our sessions were getting so emotional because of the pain as she, expressed her pain. And I remember I asked her, how are you coping with all this? And she told me, it's only God. I'm only praying. I have never imagined that my husband would do such a thing to me. And I feel like I don't have any support system around me. It's only God. Now, for a therapist who is also anchored on matters faith, that is a very important moment. And this is what we call a miracle moment. That's a miracle moment, that you can tap into that and explore issues to do with faith. And as you do that, you can also bring forth your own faith, what you know in regard to what this person is going through. Like, for example, when she said that I pray, I only pray about it. I pray, I cry myself to sleep. I pray myself to sleep. That is a miracle moment for me. And we explored that and we talked. And, I can imagine what this means for you. And I am happy to hear that at least you have a support system in prayer, in your God. And I remember the third session, I remember asking her, how can we close this session? And she told me, maybe you pray for me. And that was another now moment. I'm now answering your question, the role that my faith plays in this. And I said a prayer, and I prayed in regard to the pain that this woman was going through. And I remember that prayer very well. I know Tara will know there's something we call bibliotherapy. And it's about books and all that. But even prayer and the Bible is part of the equation. So I prayed and I made a very deliberate prayer, not just any prayer, very deliberate prayer that resonates with what this woman is going through. And I remember saying, God, I bring this woman before you. Your daughter is hurting. And it is so unfortunate for her because the source of her hurting is the least that she expected, and you validate her pain in prayer. I validated her pain in prayer. I validated her emotional injuries in prayer. And I focused her onto that same God, that same faith that she believes in. And it was a very beautiful moment. And you know what? The following day, she called me and she told me, Moffat, for the first time in the last 3 weeks, I was able to sleep last night after you prayed for me. I was able to sleep. The last 3 weeks, I was unable to sleep. I was feeling like I am going crazy. But after that prayer, I was able to sleep. So that is the role my faith plays in therapy. Thank you.
Many layers to the healing powers of Mr. Moffat.
I mean,
Inspirational.
that is
A great story.
right up my alley. I mean, it warms my heart, and I see it so often. And so whatever people want to call it, if they want to call it prayer or a miracle or faith, it's real. And so thank you for that. Thank you for the work you do.
Yep.
And those prayers.
One more thing that I need to
Sure.
One more thing that we need to get from Mr. Moffat, because he has so many answers. We always like to provide, we have a really passionate and thoughtful audience that is always willing to learn and has a desire to learn and better themselves and continue on their journey. So what are some strategies that you use? You're dealing with all of these traumas and opening yourself up to really connecting with people. You're a humble man, but that burden certainly must weigh on you at times when you're hearing all these stories and seeing all of this pain week to week and day in and day out. So what are some things that you do to strengthen yourself outside? Do you have any routines or practices outside when you need to just step away and recharge and keep yourself strong and not get too overextended and worn out yourself, so you can keep waking up and providing and doing the wonderful work that you're doing? So maybe you can give us some ideas and some things that you do that the listeners, can adapt on their own.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Number one, let me say professionally, I am required to also have my therapist, and I usually go for supervisions. And there are times, like I remember, I was actually telling my wife, there's a case that I handled yesterday that really weighed me down. And I think it's because the entire day, because it came in the afternoon, again, I was so busy with some other things, and I felt like I'm running out of resources. And I was feeling so exhausted, and I could tell, even in therapy, that I am not being productive here. I'm able to perceive and to feel myself when I am drying up. And in such a situation, I usually go to my supervisor. We usually have clinical supervisors, and I can talk about some of those cases that are weighing me down. I am running out of, internal resources, and I get rejuvenated. That is one. Number two, discipline in regards to my time. I have set apart my weekends. I usually don't take sessions, and I know there are some people who are employed, they are not available on Saturdays, but it is my principle. I don't take cases on Saturdays. That is my day. It is my time with my family and to reflect about myself. That is number two. Number three, I try to connect with my friends. I usually say that every man needs a man. And I have this person who is my good friend, and he's my good friend of many years. And whenever I feel that I want some laughter, I'll go to him, do some lunch together. He's a very hilarious man. I'm also very hilarious, he knows. And whenever we want to laugh and to have some good time, I'll go to him and we will talk. Another time is taking a break. Like some 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, I just told my family, can we do a road trip? I feel like I don't want to take any sessions. We can do a road trip, and we did a trip on Friday, Saturday, Sunday we decided we were not gonna go to church. We just want to sleep, and then we came back on Monday. So that is how I try to make sure that I don't burn out. Yeah.
Oh, great answers. And like as
Thank
Tara
you.
has said throughout, Your One Self, our brand, and Journey to Your Best Self, our podcast, so aligned with those three recommendations,
Yeah.
right? You never know too much to continue to have a mentor or guide.
Yes.
Self-care is critical to keep yourself whole and rejuvenated. And then
Yeah.
family and friendship and the laughter that goes
The
and
laughter.
the love that goes along with it are so critical to anyone listening. So Mr. Moffat, thank you so much. It's been so illuminating. Thank you for your generosity of your time right now with us, and the generosity that you've proven that's working in your community, right? In your city, in the nation. You're going to different countries in East Africa. You have another trip planned. Hopefully, before that one occurs, we can have you back on to discuss. Now it's international, right? Like so.
Yeah,
When we're going to share
let's
your
work
website,
together.
Mshauri Therapy Hub, hopefully our audience can support you as well, and then also get support from us providing that link. I think the networking with you is going to really bring help to everyone that's involved, because your teaching and your selflessness and your empathy is it just comes across, so powerfully. I think this relationship, I'm so fortunate, Tara, I think as well, and so many people that are in our audience, I think, are going to be helped. So thank you again so much.
Yeah. So thank you once again. I am also very, very appreciative, Tara and Brian, for this opportunity. Going back to what we said at the beginning, this is an area that really needs a lot of support. Like now, I know I chatted you, Brian, and I told you that this something that I'm really thinking about, how I can be of help to people who can not even afford to pay for therapy. And I remember in the year 2015, I flew to Canada to benchmark to see, how they do therapy there. And I have an idea of the kind of therapy center I would want to have, and especially I'm looking forward to partners and people who may want to support this cause, so that I can be able to establish such a thing. And people, I am looking forward. I've been telling God that I want to go to a place where I don't have to really charge people who come to me, but I can have a pool of therapists who are being supported by well-wishers, but they are able to help some of these people. Then maybe the other opportunity I may want to look for is opportunities for seminars and workshops and trainings, even internationally, that are geared towards, again, supporting this cause. So if such an opportunity avails, I would be very, very appreciative of such an opportunity. So thank you so much. I also look forward to having a school that I'm teaching people to help others.
Yeah,
So thank you so much. I so much appreciate.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Asante.